This stuff is amazing, and it's a little worrisome, right?
Selecting for the genetic component of IQ, we can really, really push evolution.
You wrote that we will progress more over the next 14 years than we have in the past 100 years.
We have these new capabilities that would not be possible to see with our unaided human brains. How can we think a little bit differently about how we do healthcare?
There's a lot of stuff where no one's really working on. Whatever disease that you have or that you're getting or that your dad or mom has.
We're changing our healthcare system.
What scared me, though, is that well, glad to have you back on, man. It's kind of cool that you're not a floating head on Skype or whatever.
You know, sometimes I wonder that myself, but I'm really thrilled to be here with you. But this is the first time we've met in person, so that's great too. You're much better looking in person than
You're right. I am. Thank you. There's a lot to be excited about in our lifetimes coming up anyway. Well, I mean, right now, yes, but also coming up as well.
For sure coming up. But right now, I mean, what a miracle just to be alive. The odds of being on this one planet, we don't know if there are others that support life. I'd rather be a human than kind of any other life form on Earth. We're already humans, we're fed and we're clothed and we can have these amazing technology. I think it's pretty great.
It is great. It is great. Our lifetimes might be extended for quite a long time as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope so. I lecture a lot about this. And I was actually the keynote speaker a few weeks ago at the Milan Longevity Forum. And what I always say is the basic science.
I assume that's in Milan, Michigan.
Exactly. Yeah. And they have great Italian food there. The basic science about extending lifespan is actually really exciting. So we've extended the life of roundworms, of mice, but humans aren't just big roundworms. We're not just big mice. So the applied science, where people are saying, oh, this thing worked in mice, therefore you humans should do this, that's a bunch of baloney. And so I do think that while the basic science is incredibly exciting, the applied science is just being massively overhyped. So you have all these people taking these NAD plus boosters that people use, like getting blood transfusions from their kids, people doing all sorts of things.
Brian,
yeah, exactly. My friend, all sorts of things that are just at worst not proven, and some of them, like telomerase, are actually harmful. So if you want to live a long life, do blue zone stuff, exercise, eat a healthy diet, have loving, supporting relationships, do all of those things. The other stuff, we don't know whether it will help at all, and it could hurt you.
Yeah, the NAD thing, you can imagine, people send me books, people send me supplements too. Like, hey, this is scientifically proven to reduce aging. And then there's
mice, if you're a mouse.
Yeah, if you're a mouse, but also what we mean by that is your skin will look healthy as you slowly rot inside.
Yeah, and it's not just if you're a mouse. It's if you're a genetically engineered, cloned laboratory mouse, because they live in these absolutely controlled conditions. So it could work. David Sinclair is a friend of mine. And
anti-aging doctor.
Yeah, well, he's the kind of the guru of these NAD plus boosters, particularly NMN, a professor at Harvard Medical School. But who knows whether this stuff works? Again, humans, we're not just big mice. And so we have all these gurus who are saying, hey, do this. We have no clue whether it works. Again, it could be harmful.
Yeah, I worry about it being harmful. Yeah. It also makes you feel like crap. You ever done that Did you try intravenous NAD or anything?
Oh my, no, I don't do it all because I don't. If there's a thing, I don't know it will help. Yeah. Like you don't want to be the first person in an experiment. You should be like number 10,000 when all these other DIY people, listeners, probably have tried it out and there's, oh my God, I did it. And if just an N of 1 isn't enough, because like who knows what's happening, but that's why I'm for proof.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I went into a doctor near me to try ketamine therapy. Which is actually something I did not need. I was recommended to try it. I think it's for depression, which I do not have. Yeah. But people are asking me about it. So it's like, well, I have a policy. I will never put anything in I will never ask you to put anything in your body if I haven't put it in mine. Right. Like that's my supplement rule for the show.
Right. Sure.
And that's not great because it's not like, oh man, Jordan died taking it. Well, I don't want to.
Because we're not going to take that.
Right. Like it's just, me taking it and trying it doesn't mean it's good or safe or useful. Right. But anyway, they put the NAD in there and I just felt absolutely horrible and sick. And I was like, what is this trash? And they're like, oh, it's anti-aging, but it's also also good for the ketamine thing. Anyway, I interviewed Dennis Rodman on this show years ago, and he was on an NAD IV drip during the show, and he was basically falling asleep and hunched over. And I was like, turn that thing down.
But who knows what he had been doing the night before? Well, there's so many variables. So we don't even know whether this does anything in people. And then that's the problem is we kind of go from, hey, here's one study in laboratory mice to everybody needs to take it. And the reason they can do it is that these nutraceuticals aren't regulated here in the United States. So it's like trillions of dollars of sales. Nobody has any clue whether almost all of it works. And I think that's the challenge. We all want to believe that these things are true, that we can just take these magic pills and there are some magic pills for sure. But so far, these anti-aging pills aren't proven to be magic. Exercising an hour a day, that's magic. Eating a healthy diet, not eating a lot of processed foods, that's magic. So my feeling is focus on the magic,
What's crazy is all of this comes down, these people will take anything, but really it's like if you slept more and you ate more fiber, you would be 20% ahead of where you are now. And it's like, nah, I want to stay up all night partying with celebrities, but then take an IV drip in the morning.
Exactly. And I'm not going to eat healthy vegetables, but I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to have a scoop of AG1, which if they're your sponsor.
They are.
Okay. Yeah. I love AG1. All I'm saying is, but for me, I'd rather.
That's what I was going to say.
Exactly. No, I mean, nothing wrong with it. And frankly, if I wasn't eating a healthy diet, I think it's actually great. If you're running around and you don't have time and you...
As I take a sip of
exactly.
Definitely good for your diet.
Yeah. No, if you don't have time, like that's a great way to get nutrients. But if you have time, have a beautiful salad from your garden or from I think that it's like we feel like science isn't there to totally save us. Science is there to help us. And we also have to help ourselves. We have to recognize that we represent 3.8 billion years of evolution.
Yeah.
We've learned a couple things along the way. So let's integrate what we've learned and these new capabilities, but we shouldn't all just feel like, oh, the new thing is better than the old thing, or in the context of AI, the new thing is just gonna replace the old thing of us. Like we're kind of an incredible species. We have a lot of tricks up our sleeves.
Yeah, it's scary when you think, I interviewed, do you know Dr. David Feigenbaum? You know who that is?
Oh, he's my friend.
Oh, good.
I love him.
Such a good guy.
I mean, he's just to take your own adversity and to turn your adversity not just into something that saves you, but that saves an increasing number of other people. Incredible. I love that guy.
I had a great episode with him on the show, but it was scary because, and he said the same thing. He said when he was sick, he thought, surely there's thousands of people working on every conceivable disease that you can get. And the answer is, if you have diabetes, there's a lot of people working on it. If you have, what would he have, Castleman's syndrome or whatever it's called?
Yep.
No one is working.
Yeah, because
no one.
That's the thing is there are these rare diseases because there's so much diversity within humans.
Yeah.
And if you have something that everybody has, then there's a lot of energy.
Like there's billions of dollars.
Yeah, well, I mean, even things where we're having a hard time treating, like Alzheimer's, we know that lots of people are getting dementia and Alzheimer's. The numbers are going up. So there's a lot of money. But if you had something like what David had or all of these other rare diseases that he's trying to work on, there's not a lot of money going. And that's why, I know we're going to get to talking about my book, but
eventually,
it's okay. I'm just enjoying chatting. But the basic thing is we have these new capabilities to see patterns that would not be possible to see with our unaided human brains. And we're able to see connections between things. And because of that, we're able to group unlike things, seemingly unlike things together. And that's what David is doing, is to say, all right, so we have these rare diseases that are individually rare, but collectively they're not rare. So how can we think a little bit differently about how we do healthcare so we can solve this bigger category of rare diseases rather than saying that everything needs to go into this one problem of Castleman's disease.
What scared me, though, is that there's a lot of stuff where no one's really working on it. And rare doesn't mean, 1 in 300 million people got this. It means that there's like 20,000 people or more at any given time, probably way more, with whatever disease that you have or that you're getting or that your dad or mom has. It's like ALS is like this horrible way to go where your body slowly shuts down, but your brain is working. And then eventually you can only blink and then you stop breathing, or your heart stops. That's truly awful. And it's not like there's not 5 people that have this. Like there's thousands and thousands, but it's still not enough to make it happen. So these breakthroughs and are kind of,
right.
You know, you don't think about them when you're 30. You're just like, whatever. Oh, that's cool.
Right.
But then when you're 44, like me, or probably when you're 54 or 64, you're like, oh, are they gonna? My dad died of that. Yep. Oh, wait a minute. He died when he was 3 years older than I am right now. Oh, wait a minute. What if I get that? And then you start losing sleep.
Well, you know, it's a really important point that you just made about kind of awareness at different ages, and I write about this in the book in the context of my chapter on healthcare. Because of these intersecting AI, genetics, and biotechnology revolutions, because we're able to start seeing things, seeing patterns differently, we're changing our healthcare systems. And I'll circle back to why this is important for the age thing. So we're moving from our world of generalized healthcare based on population averages. We treat you because you're a human, to our world of personalized or precision healthcare, saying we need to know who you are on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need all of your regular medical information, but also your whole sequence genome and all of this other systems biology information that we use. And that's with gene therapies and these then personal called pharmacogenomics, meaning we tailor drugs for your biology. It's not drugs for people, it's drugs for you. But as we build these huge data sets, and the basic formula is bigger and more and higher quality data, more computing power and better algorithms, that's what lets us see these patterns. We're going to move into the next phase of our healthcare, which is predictive and preventive. And in predictive and preventive, it's not, hey, wait till you're 65 and then a symptom shows up.
Right.
It's, hey, this symptom, maybe if it's a genetic disorder, maybe that if you're 44, maybe that genetic disorder started, the germ of that was 44 years and 9 months ago.
Right.
And if your parents knew from that moment, maybe just soon after your mother's egg was fertilized,
sure,
or after birth, hey, this is a concern. There are things that for a lot of diseases that you could do earlier in life. It's type 2 diabetes, focus on diet and exercise.
Yeah,
if it's a genetic form of breast cancer, early screening rather than waiting until you're 40. So we're going to move back in. And so then the goal of healthcare in many ways of life, and it's what your whole podcast is about, is that we have a range of possibility. How do we function toward the upper level of that range? And then are there places where we can go above our innate capability? And anyone who's vaccinated, you're already doing that. If you're wearing glasses, you're already doing that. But maybe there are going to be other areas, not just in healthcare and everywhere. And I think that's really exciting.
It is exciting. You're right. I suppose if you knew, like, hey, you're gonna end up with colon cancer, almost for sure. Yeah. We figured out how to look for that in the genome, and there you are. You would eat a ton of or whatever. You did a ton of fiber.
A ton of AG1.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if there's fiber in there. But you would eat. You would be having a salad every day, or you'd be taking that Metamucil from the time you were 3 years old, in your baby bottle, for God's sake, right? And then you might be able to dodge that bullet.
That's such an essential point, because I just think that exactly, and it's such a clear thing, is if you knew you were going to get colon cancer, or you knew you were going to get it, you knew you were at high risk. How big of a deal would it be for you to be a vegetarian who eats a bunch of salads?
Yeah.
And it's like no big deal at all.
It wouldn't be a question. It'd be like your religion. You would just do it, and nobody would be able to shake you out of it.
Yeah, and versus not doing that, living a different way. And when you're X years old, you have colon cancer, and now
you have 6 months to live.
Yeah. So I just think that we just need to, one, start thinking a little bit differently. And two, we need to think, well, what's I was giving a big talk. We did a science salon at the MIT Museum last night. And everywhere I go, people ask, like, what's the role of humans in a world of these powerful technologies? And I think there's a wonderful future for humans. But humans have co-evolved with our technologies for thousands of years, and more likely small numbers of tens of thousands of years. So it's not us versus our technology. Our technology is us. It's a manifestation of us. And the question is, what's the best way for us to co-evolve in a healthy, sustainable way with our technologies? And these kinds of examples where you could imagine having sensors in our bathrooms, even inside of our bodies, that are just saying, hey, here's a concern. So I've written about this. It's like, what I would love is to have sensors all over my bathroom, and they're watching me, they're in the toilet, they're doing breath, and I'm not even noticing it. And then I have a smoothie, every morning, and my bathroom AI communicates with the refrigerator AI. Every morning, I'm just getting my smoothie. It tastes exactly the same, but there's just like a balance of different vitamins and minerals and nutrients. And I think we need to make it seamless. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go do technology now. There's a healthy ecosystem where the technology supports us.
Yeah, that would be kind of like a smart blender that says, we've analyzed what you did this morning and you need more fiber.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we have that. I mean, so we already have that with basically digital pills where you have kind of all of these inputs and then it says, all right, we'll take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then it's a pill. Like, why even think about it? I think it's exactly that thing. You need a little fiber. Here's where it feels like you're getting a cold. We're going to put a little more zinc and vitamin C in your smoothie. In my dream scenario, you don't even taste it. It's just happening. It's just life.
What are those things called? Those glucose monitors that jab you, but they're a sticker?
Yeah.
Continuous glucose.
Yeah. So have you done it?
I have, and it was. I thought, oh, where's the part that does where's the computer? Yeah. It's so small. It's inside
it's
a
incredible.
pin.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's literal NFC technology in here where I tap my phone on a piece of tape that's on my elbow, basically, tricep, and it tells the phone what my blood sugars looked like for the last 9 hours. Like, this is nuts. So in 10 or whatever years, you're going to be able to have that. And it's going to be like, here's the entire vitamin chemical content of your blood.
Yeah.
You do need more zinc, or you are really low on vitamin D. So we drop some into your smoothie, or just take a supplement because go get in the sun, whatever it is. It's right around the corner. Because when I saw that, I thought, this is the thing. It's like this little disc.
I know. Yep.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And that's eventually going
I think it's right, and I think it's a perfect example. Like, so many people, they think about the future of technology, and it's like, oh my God, it's the Terminator. Yeah. They're coming to get us. Some of this stuff can be just really simple stuff that leads to really actionable outputs that are helpful, and so I think that's, in my mind, what this whole thing is about. People feel like this technology question is a yes or no question. Yes, we're going to do it and we're all in and it's the end of humanity. Excuse me. Or no, we don't do it. And then we have to go back to the ice ages to protect us against Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the truth of the matter, at least as I see it, is that there's just going to be so many different manifestations, and some of them are going to be incredibly awesome, like this. Some of them are going to be terrible. Some things we're going to try something and we're saying, oh, geez, that was a mistake, and we're going to have to shut it down. And most of them we're just going to be kind of trying to negotiate what's the best use. Like, we all love our cars, but it took a while to have like crappy Pintos that were lighting on fire, and we had to figure out how to do cars. And now we're the beneficiaries, and now we're saying, all right, what's the next step for cars? And maybe it is these driverless cars that get in far fewer accidents than we humans do. Maybe it's something else. That's the path of humanity.
One of the most fascinating things is how fast progress is accelerating. You write in the book. So when I look at progress, right, I think, wow, look at what happened over the last 50 years. That is amazing. Look how far we've come. Yeah. It's absolutely incredible. And then someone will say, like, well, the iPhone didn't exist at this point. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's true. Yeah. Right? The smartphone didn't exist. You didn't have internet in your pocket, whatever. And there's still a long way to go, but the rate of progress is increasing a ton. And that's something that is hard to perceive as a human. We're not used to that. So you wrote that we will progress more over the next 14 years than we have in the past 100 years, which that is really hard to wrap your brain around. And then the next 7 years will be another century of progress at today's rate of progress. So, and I'll just repeat that. Over the next 14 years, we're going to progress more than we have in the last century. And the 7 years after that will be another 100 years-ish of progress, which that's insane. That's insane. That's like steam engine to iPhone, but it's going to happen in 14 years. What the hell? How?
So that's what is. So as you know, Jordan, I write nonfiction, but I also write science.
Hopefully.
But I also write fiction. I also write science fiction because I just feel like to think about this point that you've raised, we have to overcome the innate, evolved conservatism of our brains. Tens, hundreds of thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands, there were two early humans in the savannas of Africa, and they were standing together. One of them was your ancestor, and one was somebody else. And that other guy was looking up in the sky and saying, "Oh, there's a bird. Someday, maybe humans can fly like birds, and wouldn't that be great?" And your ancestor was the guy who said, "Hey, is that a rustle in the grass? That could be a saber-toothed tiger. I remember last time there was a rustle in the grass. There was a saber. I'm out of here." And so your ancestor ran because they were selected for that practical thing. And the other guy, this dreaming guy, that's the guy who got eaten by the saber-tooth. And it happens over and over again. So our practical thinking, it's our core survival skill. It's why we've lasted. But now every technology begets every other technology. So we have 4 times more humans now than we did 100 years ago. We have 85% literacy, global literacy rate now. It was 15% 100 years ago, so more educated people. We're connected to each other, so nobody's solving problems that have already been solved. We have these, what I call, it's the title of the book, Superconvergence, superconverging technologies where every technology is embedded in every other. So we had the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago. That made our civilizations possible with their writing systems. When you look at computer code, what are the letters? We call them Latin letters. They're actually ancient Phoenician letters. That's what makes up the computer codes. With these computer languages, we can have the computing revolution, which enables the machine learning revolution, which enables the AI revolution. And with the tools of AI, we're interrogating evolved natural systems, like how a plant distributes nutrients through a leaf, and using those patterns to design better computer chips that speed up the machine learning, AI, let us understand evolved natural systems more. So there's just an acceleration because we're learning more with more people, unleashing human imagination, and we have these incredible tools and capabilities and technologies that are getting better and better. And that doesn't mean everything is going to advance at this rate, but anything that can be digitized, anything that's connected to these kinds of scientific and technological capabilities is going to accelerate. And that's why, again, it's the central point of the book. If we think this is a conversation about technology, we're going to get lost. This is a conversation about humanity, and it's a conversation about values. It's about who are we as we guide these revolutions? What are the values that we seek to infuse into every decision about how these technologies are or aren't used, so that we can try to, again, co-evolve with our technology to build the kind of future that we want? That doesn't mean there aren't going to be twists and turns and problems. There certainly will. But we need to know what we're trying to achieve as individuals and as a community. And that needs to guide us going forward.
The whole 21st century will see progress equivalent to 20,000 years. That's a pretty bold claim, man.
You know, it's just the rate of acceleration is just unbelievable. And acceleration begets acceleration. When people think about AI, most people I speak with, oh, AI, I just did AI. I went to ChatGPT and I did AI. That's how most people think.
Yeah.
And then what I say is, tell me, how did electricity influence your life today? And people take a step and think, well, I guess I woke up with an alarm clock. Oh, but I was in my house and we had air conditioning and there was a car and I guess there was food and my clothes. And then you think, geez, electricity is in everything. It's in my haircut, insofar as I have hair. It's everywhere. And that's the thing. AI isn't, I'm going to go do AI. AI is going to be just part of everything. It's going to be an accelerant for everything. It's going to be woven into everything. We have these new things, self-driving laboratories. So we have the pace of scientific change has been regulated just by what scientists can do. But now we have new programs like Google DeepMind's AlphaFold 3, which just came out, that by my calculations that I described in the book, it saved 645 million years of human researcher time. So it would take, just a decade ago, 3 years for a human scientist to characterize a single protein, which means to understand a protein, you need to understand the string of amino acids and you need to understand the shape. So to characterize one, to match those two things using the older approach called X-ray crystallography or even electron microscopy would take about 3 years. So there's roughly 215 million proteins known to science. Mm-hmm. So if you say that 215 million times 3 years, 645 million years to characterize every protein. Now we have this program that they can do it in a couple of days. And so that's 645 million years that scientists and researchers can
be done by
exactly by lunch. I've got a lunch.
Right.
No, but they can redeploy rather than spending your entire career saying, how do we characterize a protein? It's what do we do with a characterized protein? Mm-hmm. And it's not just that. It's what are all of the other problems in the world that are at this or a lower level of complexity, mm-hmm. where there's there's a certain ingredients, you need to have a solvable problem, you need to have a data set for the AI systems to train on and some other things. But there are a lot of problems at that or lower levels of complexity. And so let's say now we're putting 200 million years of innovation time back into the pot. What are the things that we're going to do? And every problem, like I was saying before, resets the baseline so that somebody who might have spent their whole life trying to solve this problem, they show up to work the next day. Oh, this problem is already solved.
Right.
What's the next problem that I'm going to solve? And so that's what we are. People think this is about technology. We are unleashing one of the greatest powers in the known universe, and that is human imagination.
Yeah, it's wild, man. So somebody in 1900, right? They'd be amazed by the television. They would just go, "Wow, look at that flat color picture," and they'd be looking behind it, like I just can't believe it.
Yeah.
But AI, even ChatGPT in high-speed internet. Imagine showing that to somebody in the Stone Age who's on the ground in the dirt, banging one rock against another one, and sees a spark, and is like suddenly like, whoa.
Exactly.
You know, right? Or is like banging this out and you're like, what are you doing? He's making a spearhead out of stone so he can throw it at a woolly mammoth. And you're trying to show him ChatGPT and you're like, no, what you do is you ask this thing and he's like, what? How does he's looking behind it? He literally can't even. What are these things that are appearing, right? This written language, and you're like, oh crap, I got to back up the truck.
You know, so your listeners won't know this, but you and I are in this studio, which is appropriately called WTF Studio.
That's
and
right.
The thing is, for this Stone Age guy, how many WTFs would they say as you tried to explain television to this Stone Age person?
Who doesn't have spoken language.
And you'd be like, let's say WTF in that is like, "Arr." It's like, you'd say, oh, here's this, and it's like, "Arr."
A lot of
and then it's like, and here's another thing, "Arr." And you would have to say, like, what does that even mean? How is that even possible? And now we're more accustomed to internalizing, impossible things. And then they just become normal. Like people for one day are like, oh my God, ChatGPT is really cool. And then it's like, what an idiot. It doesn't recognize that you can't have 5 eggs in chocolate chip cookie recipes. I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, like, look, it made a picture where the person has 6 fingers. Well, this thing sucks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wait.
They just generated out of nowhere something that you told it to.
Exactly.
A Rembrandt style.
Right.
Because you mentioned that. And it's like, but the guy has 6 fingers. Oh, this thing is useless, man. I got to fix that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really, the exponential rate of progress is really something. I mean, we are basically nomadic hunter-gatherers in comparison to our grandkids. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, and so I write about this in the book. That's why the first chapter of the book is called The Nature of Change, because you can't understand anything about the second order questions about what are the things that are going to change, what are the dangers, how do we build the best possible world, if you haven't internalized the process of change. And I write about in the 1970s, I grew up in Kansas City, and in our basement, we had this old black and white television, and somebody in our family hooked it up. We had this game Pong, which was and it was like you had 2 dials, and there was like a little bar on each side, and there was a little dot. It was like a tennis, I guess, and it just went ping.
It's a square ball.
Ping, yeah. And then it was the coolest thing ever. It's like, and we would like literally stay up all night playing Pong. Yeah. And it was like, it's never going to get any better than this, Pong. And so now obviously there's Grand Theft Auto, there's ChatGPT, there are all these kinds of things. But Chat GPT, GPT-4, GPT-4o, every technology that we have now is Pong. 10 years ago, we're saying, remember when we thought GPT-4 was so cool? It was so basic. And it's always going to be. This is going to get better and better, faster and faster. And I think that's the thing. Everybody always thinks, oh my God, like people thought 100 years ago, this is the height of progress. And that doesn't mean things can't go wrong and things don't twist and turn. And we had 2 world wars. But we are beginning this process of acceleration, and that really changes everything.
You mentioned we'll be able to solve, well, AI will not only solve problems that are complex, but we're going to solve new ways to solve new problems faster. And then the results will be distributed immediately across the globe. You gave, in the book, you talk about, is it Mendel, Darwin?
Yeah.
They would have figured out not only that evolution exists, but also how natural selection works. But neither of them had both of those things solved.
Yeah, they were puzzle pieces.
Right.
And so that's what is kind of incredible. So Mendel and Darwin, Darwin actually had a book in his library that included Mendel's famous paper, which Darwin never read, and Mendel's it took more than 30, but nobody Mendel was unrecognized during his lifetime. It was about 30 years after his death.
He should watch his Punnett squares and classes.
Exactly.
Like, wow,
that he was rediscovered. So it was like they were all. It's the point I was making earlier when we were all kind of not connected. When people were discovering like the difference between when the Bronze Age started, or in different civilizations, it was thousands of years apart. So if you're in a place that didn't have the recipe for bronze, it's 2,000 years. You're just doing stuff in another way. You're making tools in another way, making weapons another way, doing all those kinds of things. And you're not contributing your knowledge to the universe of, hey, what's the cool stuff that we can do with bronze? Now everything gets, you have an innovation, it's shared the next day. Right. And so you don't have this problem. So we have just collective problem solving. So these drivers of evolution. So Darwin, which it was really kind of incredible, how he figured out that random mutation and natural selection are driving evolution forward. But he didn't really understand what could be the mechanism generating that random mutation, and that's what Mendel was studying with his pea plants and that was saying, well, there's genetic inheritance, and it gets kind of shuffled up, and part comes from the father and part comes from the mother. And so I think again, it's this same story of humans learning. We're understanding these natural systems. There's a term, synthetic biology, which I don't really like. There's 2 terms that I really don't like. One is synthetic biology, and the other is artificial general intelligence. And and the thing that I don't like about synthetic biology, the word, even though I was just at the SynBio conference in San Jose, and I'm in that work.
You hated the name.
Well, I say it very. I have the 3. I'll tell you a third thing that I'll say in a sec. But because I don't think what's happening is not humans generating biology from scratch.
Okay.
I think a better term, which I didn't coin, is nature co-design. There's a natural world. And certainly for at least 10,000 years since the dawn of agriculture, but even longer, humans have been tweaking the natural world in order to drive the kinds of outcomes that we want. So getting plants that we don't have, where we don't have to hunt to go and gather them from the wild, or doing all.
You're planting the strawberries that you liked near you.
Near you. So you don't have to go. And most of these things, our ancestors wouldn't have even known what they were, because if you just go into Whole Foods, pretty much the entire sustainable organic section is all shit that we humans have essentially invented. If you said, like, show me this, show me broccoli.
Yeah.
20,000 years ago, like you could look around the world, you would never find broccoli, you'd never find corn, you'd never find any of these.
Somebody gave me a natural strawberry, and I was like, oh, you don't have any, why are they so small?
Yeah.
It's like, this is what a strawberry looks like.
Yeah.
Like, no, strawberry fits in it's like a baseball.
Exactly.
I take a bite out of it.
That's one thing when French people come here. It's like, what the hell is that? It doesn't taste good, but it looks good.
What did you inject it? No, they grow like that.
Exactly. So the basic point is science is a team sport. Mm-hmm. It requires a lot of people coming together. And because of that, as our ability to come together increases, as our technologies become better, we're just able to do better things. So I don't like the term synthetic biology. I don't like the terms artificial and general intelligence, because we're not. When I ask people what it is, it's like AIs that can do everything that humans can do. If we create AIs that can do everything that humans do, we are screwed. Humans.
Well, yeah.
We have like we're an evolved. No, but like we have an evolved embodied intelligence. It's 3.8 billion years. Like you and I are here. Like we've done, this is our third podcast interview that we've done.
I'm glad you know that, because I was like,
third.
Once before?
Third.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. This is our first one in person. So it's the first time that we've met in person, although we've been in touch for years. There's something different about being in person. And
there is.
It's not just intelligence. Like our bodies are covered in all of these sensors. We have all these perceptions, some of which get to the point of, I'm analyzing why this is happening. And some of them are just like Ed Yong had a great book called An Immense World, where he talks about every animal is like covered with all these sensors. And these sensors are survival mechanisms where you're just figuring out, what foods am I comfortable eating? Yeah. What person am I comfortable trusting? Is this a safe environment? All these things, questions that we know to ask, questions that we don't know how to ask. So if we made an AI that was just an AI human, I'd actually be terrified.
Well, it's brain only with all the sensors ripped out.
Exactly, right? Yeah, without the everything. And so what we're doing is not creating an AGI, which again, I don't know what that is. We are creating a machine intelligence. No one looks at a dog and says, my dog is a really dumb human, or that dolphin is a dumb human. A dog has just dog intelligence. There's better and worse dog intelligence. There's better and worse dolphin intelligence. I'm sure, although it's hard for us to decipher what that is. We're creating that new thing. And that's the conversation that we should have. We're making, and then the third thing is apropos of nothing, but I said it last night, and then these people got really pissed off. Because I was—
Don't invite him back again.
Exactly. Well, no, I was talking about how we're entering this new age of rapid technological innovation. It's going to create all these opportunities and all these challenges. And we have to really think about how do we govern these, how do we use these powers wisely? Because if we use them wisely, we unlock this amazing future. We can cure all of these cancers and feed everybody and clothe everybody and change our models for living. We can do it much more sustainably, even rewild big parts of the planet. But if we get it wrong, we're massively screwed in all sorts of ways. And I write about that in the book. And so I said, and so if all we're doing is saying, hey, this is about consciousness raising, we're going to be screwed. And then I said the thing that pissed people off. So I said, that's why I think that Greta Thunberg has been a net negative contributor to the world. Because
you threw shade on Greta Thunberg?
I threw shade. People got really pissed off. And the reason was in the beginning when she was saying, hey, we need to be aware of climate change. Yeah. That was actually really important. She got all these kids around the world, and we need these kids. And I certainly work with lots of kids on idealistic ventures, like my global interdependence movement, which you could maybe talk about later. But then everybody becomes an effing Kardashian. Well, yeah. So Donald Trump realized, hey, it's an attention economy. The way to if you get attention, you can translate attention into power and money. So he realized, I'm just going to be the most outrageous on every issue. And Greta Thunberg is like Greta Thunberg Kardashian. It's like first she was climate and outrage climate, then don't go to school. And now it's like, well, it's about Hamas. Right. And it's like—
she solved climate in education. So
no, but the thing is, when it's an attention economy,
right,
you have to be the Kardashian. You have to be at the far end of extremism. You have to be so outrageous that you are capturing that attention. Because if you don't, someone else is going to be more outrageous than you. And so rather than people saying, hey, what's the North Star? What am I trying to actually achieve? People, and it's on all sides, it's Trump, it's AOC, it's Greta Thunberg, are saying, well, how can I be the most outrageous person? Because then I'm going to get that attention and money. And instead, and again, the reason I've written the book is what we should be saying is, what's our North Star? So if you're an ancient sailor, you say, well, I'm trying to get from here to there. There's where I'm going. There are going to be winds blowing in all different directions. I'm going to have to tack this way. I'm going to have to attack this way. I'm going to have to learn. I'm going to have to adapt. But I know that's where I'm going. Mm-hmm. If we don't have that conversation about values and goals, and this is just, hey, there's a bunch of technology, let's look at the technology. if it's not about where are we going and how do we get there, we're going to get lost in a really dangerous way.
Yeah, there are activists that do not go into the extreme zone, and they're still doing a good job. I mean, look at Malala Yousafzai. She doesn't go.
Wonderful.
She's not on TikTok screwing around with
exactly.
causes.
And she's saying, here's what I'm trying to achieve.
Right.
It's not like, oh my God, the camera's there, I'm going there. It's like there, and that's why she's amazing. It's like there are all these women and girls who are being oppressed. I have my personal story and my courage, which gives me this platform. And I'm going to really focus on what are all of the things that I can do. So I'm not saying don't be in front of the camera, obviously.
Yeah. Say that straight to the camera.
Sorry. I didn't know which one we have. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Take your pick.
Sorry, I looked at camera 4. What I'm saying is this is about values. It's not about attention. It's about values. And sometimes I'm here with you on this podcast, obviously. So fighting for your values, you have to fight for them in the place where their fate is being determined. But we have to say, well, here's what we're fighting for. We're not fighting for outrage. We're not fighting for attention. We're fighting for desired outcomes.
You talk in the book, you mentioned in the book about the Chinese engineered babies, or maybe I just took that note based on something you
both, yeah.
This stuff is amazing, and it's a little worrisome, right? So essentially, children are being bred is kind of a creepy word, but whatever, with super high IQs.
Well,
can you explain this?
Yeah. Let me say.
I can tell by your face I've already.
Yeah. No. It's a few different things woven together. So in 28, so I'll even go back. The first time you and I spoke was around the time, I think it was 2019, for the launch of my then book, Hacking Darwin. And that book was on the future of human genetic engineering, when a big piece of that was human assisted reproduction. So in the late 2018, when that book was on its way to being printed, I called my publisher and I said, we need to pull this book out of production because I said here, and I've got bad news and good news. And so the bad news is that in the book I write, it's about the future of human genetic engineering. And we can't publish a book about human genetic engineering after the first CRISPR babies have been born, and those were genome-edited babies that were born in China. The good news is that in the book, I predicted that this would happen. I predicted it would happen in China and explained why I thought it was going to happen in China. And I included a list of 5 specific genes that I thought were going to be the first targets of this genetic manipulation in China, and CCR5, which was that gene, was one of the genes on my list. And so for this, which was the hardback version, all we need to do is I just need to add a couple of sentences saying, and this thing that I've exactly predicted has happened.
It's easier to change an unborn child's genes than it is to pull a book out of print.
Here's where we're potentially going. And that is, so actually just a week and a half ago, I was in Lisbon. I was the keynote speaker for the International Embryologists Association, which actually in my mind is endlessly fascinating field. But
Ohio's really nice this time of year. Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think we're traveling to all the same places. And so we are moving to a world because of all of our new capabilities, including genome sequencing. We're able to process and understand these vast amounts of data. Right now, actually yesterday, the Southern Baptists had a vote, and they're voting against IVF, which is in my mind deeply unfortunate because so much beautiful life has been brought into the world in IVF. And so with IVF, in vitro fertilization, which has now been around for 45 years, the mother's eggs are extracted from her body, fertilized with the biological father's sperm, grown for a certain number of days, and then put back into the mother. And that's why I'm sure there are lots of people who are actually listening to this podcast who are IVF babies. And IVF is a wonderful miracle for life. There's a more recent tool called pre-implantation genetic testing. And what that means is So when you have this fertilized egg, you have to grow it in a laboratory environment. And so everybody knows this from high school biology or even before, is that you start from 1 cell, and then you're 2 cells, then you're 4 cells, then you're 8 cells. And so after about 5 days of that kind of replication, you extract a few cells from the little zygote, that little ball of cells, and then you can sequence them. And so because essentially the genetic recipe for us is in every cell, then you can understand something about that future, what it would be a future child. So right now, that's used to say, all right, this child is going to have some deadly single gene mutation disorder. There are some kind of diseases and disorders where it's just 1 letter's off, and then you could have a deadly disorder as a result of that. And so if you're doing IVF and you're choosing between 10 embryos, you could say, well, I'm not going to pick one of a kid that's going to die when they're 3 years old. I'm going to pick one of a kid who's not going to die when they're 3 or 5 or whatever years old. But because there's so much potential information in that cell, when you sequence it, well, what can you learn from that extracted and sequenced cell? Well, the question is, what can you learn from human genetics? And the answer is a lot. And so we're moving up the complexity scale of being able to say, all right, in addition to these single gene mutation or simple genetic patterns for things like eye color, how complex of traits can we predict? And I'm actually on the advisory board of a company, Genomic Prediction, that's doing that. But I think it's called essentially polygenic. It's called polygenic risk scoring, but really it's just going to be polygenic analysis, where you say, all right, so we have these 10. We can now order them roughly from likely tallest to likely shortest. Maybe we can rank order them likely highest genetic component of IQ to lowest genetic component of IQ, which would have big implications for all sorts of things. And then there's a newer technology, and it was not so long ago in Kyoto, Kyoto, of course, is in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And I went to the laboratory where they're pioneers in a thing called in vitro gametogenesis. But basically what it means is you take an adult cell, like a skin cell. So you do a skin graft. You have millions of cells just from a little scrape of your skin. You use a thing, you induce those adult cells into stem cells. So it's called induced pluripotent stem cells. You're taking a cell backward.
Oh, you can reverse?
Backward in evolutionary time. So now you have a stem cell. Then you take it forward in time by inducing those skin cells into stem cells, where stem cells are cells that can become anything, and then to egg precursor cells, and then to egg cells. So now
wait a minute,
you have 1 million egg cells. Like I talked about those 10.
This is real? It exists right now?
It exists not yet for human applications. This is in mice.
This is incredible.
It's incredible. So now you have 1 million eggs.
Instead of like the 12 that got taken
exactly. Out. We all have friends. I'm older than you, but we all have these friends. So I went and I had my eggs extracted and I had 3 eggs and I'm so depressed or whatever.
Now you've got 3 more.
You've got 1 million or 3. It literally, the sky's the limit, and there's trillions of cells in your body. So now you have 1 million cells, and you have an automated system. In this is still a hypothetical. But you have an automated system. You grow those 1 million cells for 5 days. In an automated way, you extract a few cells from each of those 1 million. You sequence each one of those. And now you're choosing from 1 million options. So forget genome editing, and that happen with these CRISPR babies. You're choosing from 1 million options just within the random mutation that is just part of biology. That's how we evolve. You say, what am I selecting for? What are my priorities? And say, well, I want to have high whatever genetic component of IQ. I want tall. I want short. I want somebody who's more likely to be an Olympic sprinter than somebody else. There's a lot of choice. Our ancestors took wild chickens laying 1 egg a month, and knowing nothing about the science of genetics, just with using the power of reproduction and push reproduction, turn those into domesticated chickens laying 1 egg a day. How far can we go? Who knows? But certainly if we decide that selecting for the genetic component of IQ, and there's a whole debate on what is IQ and whether it's valuable or biased or anything like that, but we'll leave that aside for now. We can really, really push evolution. And then on top of that, we already have this capability, which has already been applied unethically, in my view, to humans, of then going into the genome. Let's say you pick that 1 in a million embryos, pre-implanted embryos that you hope to implant. Then you can go in and do genome editing on that to say, all right, here are some number of changes. And again, everything is moving up the complexity scale. So 5 years ago, we'd say, well, you could go in and make one change, like change one letter to another letter. But now there are growing capacities to make multiple changes at the same time. Obviously, these are very complex, evolved biological systems. It's 3.8 billion years of trade-offs. We don't even close to fully understand how these systems work.
Wow.
But these are capabilities that we already have. And as we were saying before, these capabilities are getting better and better every single day. So our biology is about as complex as it's been for millions of years.
This is wild.
But our capabilities are increasing at this exponential rate.
So eventually it'll be, do you think most people will be born like this? Because it'll be like, look, you can take your chances. And maybe like super conservative religious people will be like, look, I'm gonna let God choose. Fine.
Right.
But for the rest of us, it might be like, nope, 6'4", no diseases, no degeneration over time, super long lifespan. I like light green, bluish eyes. It's like you could pick everything. No leg hair on the female. Yeah. Like you could just pick anything you want.
So
crazy.
My partner, my girlfriend, is younger than I am, and so that is the only exposure that I have to TikTok, that TikTok exists. And so she had this thing where she was showing me that it was like this meme, I'm looking for a man in finance, 6'5" with blue eyes. And apparently it's like people, young people around the world are like doing versions of this. So in my last book, Hacking Darwin, I have a chapter called The End of Sex, which is exactly about this, that nature has an error rate. Mm-hmm. When somebody, and I hope this happens to nobody, but when somebody says, oh, I'm having this child and this child has a deadly genetic disorder,
right?
You don't say, wow, that's Darwinism at work. That disorder, that's just part of being a human being.
Right, natural selection didn't work out.
It's like, but that's just the thing, because we're always mutating. Some help, some hurt, and some do nothing. And so it's a distribution. And so you showed up here on the distribution. No, we say, F that. We're going to do everything we can to fight it. We're going to do everything we can to save your child, which is the right answer. So nature has a built-in error rate. And so if and when we get to the point where having a child through the application of science, IVF, pre-implantation genetic testing, and if appropriate, genome editing of pre-implanted embryos, if people come to see that as a safer option than reproducing the quote-unquote old-fashioned way. And the old-fashioned way isn't even the old-fashioned way. I mean, like when we say the old-fashioned way, it's like all of these technological interventions and ultrasound and going to a hospital and the incubator and all those kinds. Like that's not the old-fashioned way. That's the new-fashioned way.
That's true.
But if it gets to the point, which I think is already happening in some parts of the world, where people perceive that doing this through science is better and safer, then people are going to do it. And then when we have this optionality of like picking embryos, maybe picking from more embryos, maybe making a small number of edits, people are going to do it, and people are going to do it more. And as people perceive benefits, they're going to want to do that. And that doesn't mean this should be unrestricted. Actually, I think that societies should restrict some of these things, because not everybody understands what's good for them. We talked about in the beginning of our conversation, we talked about these interventions where people are so desperate to slow the aging process. You could read something in Men's Health magazine and they go, I'm going to do that systemic, life-changing intervention because I read something in Men's Health. So I think we're going to get there, but we need to be cautious.
Tell me about how they grew a new ear for that woman in Mexico. This is pretty amazing, right? Because right now, people get bad kidneys or their kidneys go bad. That might not be that big of a deal.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you about that, and then I'm going to pivot to the future of animal agriculture, because it's the same thing. So as we understand these complex biological systems, we were talking about stem cells a moment ago, we realize that stuff grows. Like humans grow and parts of humans grow, and that's just biology at work. And so as we understand more of how biology works, our ability to grow things and to manage how things grow is increasing. So there's a whole new field of regenerative medicine. And so there are people who are saying, well, how do we take a tissue? And it could be any tissue. It could be skin, it could be blood, it could be cartilage, it could be whatever. And say, well, how do we grow it? And then how do we steer and manage the growth? So in regenerative medicine, there are people who are creating new, for example, tracheas or parts of humans that maybe yours doesn't work, or maybe it needed to be removed because of cancer. And then you can 3D print a scaffold, and then you can populate that scaffold with cells. And it could be your own cells, which are taken from your body and manipulated so that you can basically grow an organ. And we're still in the early days of that. And so there is the thing of somebody who grew from cartilage, they grew an ear, and somebody they had lost their ear through an accident. And so they basically gave them the new ear, and they stretched the skin over the ear. Now this young woman has a new ear, and it's just an ear. It functions like an ear. It's an ear. But then you have these physicians who were working in regenerative medicine, and then they said, hey, wait a second, we're just growing tissue. We're just growing animal tissues, because as your listeners know, humans are just animals. We're magical, wonderful animals, but animals. We could grow anything. And they said, well, why don't we, rather than killing 72 billion land animals per year, which is what we do.
That's crazy.
72 billion, 200 million metric tons of fish. What if we could grow those animals from stem cells?
Right.
And if we could do it at scale and at a competitive cost, we could change everything, because right now, half of the arable land on Earth is used for agriculture. 3/4 of that, and about 1/4 of all human greenhouse gas emissions, come from industrial animal agriculture. When people think about agriculture, they think about old McDonald's farm. That's not where the animal products that you use come from. They come from these massive industrial animal farms, where the animals are pumped full of antibiotics to keep them from dying, from being crammed together, and to facilitate their growth. Huge environmental climate implications, huge implications for deforestation, and not to mention the cruelty. And so with this, you have the healthiest, happiest animal that you have. You extract a few cells, which can be done just with a simple biopsy. The animal can have a wonderful day, even while that is happening, and keep on living. Then you grow those cells in a laboratory and transfer them to an industrial bioreactor and feed them with the appropriate nutrients. And then you can grow these animal products. So the 11 years ago, the world's first cell culture, now they like to be called cultivated, but hamburger was developed by Mark Post in the Netherlands. And the total cost of that was about $325,000 for that one burger.
It's a pricey burger. Yeah.
Now it's $10 to do that exact same thing. So everything is on this cost curve. And there's a whole industry that's going into this cell-cultivated animal product, and just in everything, whether it's milk or meat, even human breast milk, there are companies that are saying, all right, we're going to do this and we're going to grow. It's not like an Impossible Burger where we're mimicking a burger. It's actually biologically the same. And so that's this whole field. And if we do that, let's just say we take half of so we go from those 72 billion land animals to 36 billion. We just cut it in half. And because half of certainly the beef that we eat is just ground beef, when you go to McDonald's or Burger King, who knows what's in those things?
That's what that thing is, yeah.
So if it was the exact same animal products, but it was just better and safer, and it didn't have all the bacterial infections that it didn't have all of the cruelty, we could replace the animal fats, maybe with healthy omega plants. I just think people's lives would be unchanged. Like deprivation doesn't work. People say you should do this because it's the right thing. People won't do it. But if we make it easy for people, and let's just say we were to cut back our industrial animal usage by half, we would be forced. We'd have so much free land.
Yeah.
We could say, all right, I can't build more shopping malls and soccer fields because not everybody gets their own soccer field. We'd be forced to just rewild huge, like
grow some trees and put some wolves in there.
Huge, meaning like the size of Canada, huge.
Really?
Parts of the world, just because we couldn't use them. And that would go a long way toward solving huge problems like environmental degradation and climate change. Actually, in the book, I talk about one of my very, very dear friends is this wonderful Spanish, now living in the United States, National Geographic explorer named Enrique Sala. And I went back and forth with my editor because I kept adding something that was in the original manuscript. It kept getting edited out, and I talked to him about, I think I a svelte Spaniard with an Inigo Montoya ponytail. And so your listeners may know from The Princess Bride, that little swordsman's, I'm Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepared it. So they kept taking it. I said, no, it's gotta be there. So Enrique, he's one of the leaders. What started out as an effort to try to turn 30% of the oceans into protected nature preserves where people can't do industrial activities, particularly fish. And they did these calculations that if you protected those 30%, the actual availability of fish in the other 70% would go up. Like you would get more fish by not fishing in these protected areas because we're just
breeding grounds.
They're breeding, because we're just decimating them and in this relentless way. Now that's grown to 30% of the entire face. So if you have 30% of the entire face of the earth is designated as not for commercial activities. You could have tourism, you could do all these other things. It would help go a long way towards solving climate, environment, all of these other things. And so just thinking a little bit differently about two things, and I write about them in the book. One is food supply, and particularly animal products. How do we source them differently? And the other are industrial raw materials. So in the world that we benefit from, it's all about cutting down stuff and digging up stuff. Like that's how we get most of the things that we need. And it's taken us a long way. But there are new models. How do we grow the kind of materials that we need? Just one example, which I love.
This is good news because we don't all have to become vegetarians. Sorry, Gabriel, my producer's vegan. He's like, we don't need to do that.
No, but bless Gabriel. It's a great.
He's doing his part.
He's doing, and
I'm not.
If you could, and I'm not. I mean, I write about it in the book. I'm from Kansas City.
Yeah, you got it.
If you don't eat Kansas City barbecue, that's like being at the Vatican and saying, the Pope is bullshit. Yeah. It's like
Getting emails about that. Thanks a lot.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot, James.
Greta Thunberg and the Pope. By the way, speaking of the Pope, I just tweeted this morning. Incredible. So the G7 meeting is happening right now in Italy, and the Pope has gone to, I think it's in Puglia, because he wants to talk about AI safety. The Pope has gone
wants to talk about AI safety.
Which is amazing. That's why I think it's so great. I don't think the Pope is like coding.
This is a guy who probably doesn't even know how to use AOL.
But he gets that it's about values.
VOL.
That you don't need to know coding to know that something really big is happening. And you don't need to know coding to say, I want my voice to be incorporated in how people are thinking about how the future should be. So coming back to what I was saying about spider silk is like the coolest substance in the world, at least according to me. It's stronger than Kevlar.
Yeah, by weight, right?
Yeah. Stretchier than our stretchiest elastics. And you could say, oh my God, that's so great. Why don't we just do for spider silk what we do for silkworm silk? You just get a bunch of spiders, put them in a big box, and just let them do their thing. Well,
they'll eat each other.
Exactly, because they're cannibals. So you're exactly right. And so then, how do we do it? And so that's where these tools of, again, They call it synthetic biology. It's not synthetic biology. It's nature co-design. We're tweaking biological systems. So I didn't do it, but we've developed E. coli bacteria that generate spider silk proteins, just like we have these bacteria that generate insulin that everybody takes.
Isn't that also E. coli? It just
E. coli, it's like a workhorse. E. coli and baker's yeast and things like that. And then now we have goats that in their milk are producing spider silk
I feel
protein.
like I've read about this a few years ago.
Maybe, yeah, for sure.
So this goat milk has spider silk proteins, and it can later be spun.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And now there's genetically engineered silkworms. Rather than producing silkworm silk, these silkworms produce spider silk.
I see.
And so that's the thing is, it's like we live in a world of manipulated natural system. You could say, hey, let's let silkworms be silkworms. But that's not what we're doing for thousands of years. Right. We've effed with silkworms. That's why we have
rip a hole in your silk shirt. That's not going to happen. Now you're wearing a spider shirt, and somebody tries to stab you in the knife bend.
Exactly.
That's not how it works.
But now there's so many different materials that we can think of. Well, how do we generate them in other ways? And there for all of these things, there's issue of cost and scale because it's not just doing it; it's doing it better, faster, cheaper than these other ways. And so that I don't want to undersell how difficult that is, but there's a path. And the reason we know there's a path is because we have these natural systems all around us. So Carl Benz, I write about this in the book, in the 19th century, he was in his little workshop in Germany, and he was kind of imagining the car. If he had a Porsche parked in his workshop, and he could just go look around the Porsche and take pieces apart and analyze it and sequence its genome, machine genome. It would have been much easier for him to do that. So we already have these biological systems. We have systems around us that have already solved problems that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve the problem of data storage because we talk about the cloud as if our data is floating up. But it's all in these massive data centers that are taking huge amounts of energy. And every 2 years, we're creating more data than all of human history up to that point. And we're doing it over and over and over. So we're going to have to build a world of data centers. And then we're going to have to build nuclear reactors to power those data centers. It's like the old lady who swallowed the fly. Or we can say, hey, nature has already evolved the greatest data storage mechanism in all of history, which is DNA. DNA, under the right conditions, can store data for 5 million years versus 40 to 60 for magnetic tape. It's 1 million times denser than silicon. We could store all of the data in the world in one shipping container.
I read and what's funny is I read about this probably 5 years ago. Yeah. And back then it was, eventually we'll be able to show, I think it was all data on Earth can fit in a shoebox, but now there's more.
And so, the shoebox can go in the shipping container.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not.
It's a shipping container full of shoeboxes.
But that's the thing. And so, again, that doesn't mean that DNA data storage is now better than silicon data storage. It's not yet maybe there. There's all kinds of innovation about using graphene and other substances in computer chips and transistors, and that's all exciting. But we have these evolved natural systems that have their own type of genius. And as I was saying before, we have these new capabilities of understanding that genius, interrogating that genius, and saying, well, how can we manipulate it to our purposes? And how can we do so in a way that's sustainable? I know that there are some people who are going to maybe listen to this podcast and say, well, I don't want to screw with nature. I love nature. And it's like, I love nature. I love, going hiking in the canyons in LA. And it's like, it's such a preposterous argument because the reason you love going hiking in those canyons is that there are no predators there who are going to eat you.
Right.
Your ancestors are going to say, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm just going to be totally unexposed with my Lulus, going and walking in those canyons so I can get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, a pterodactyl or whatever was there. It's because we've entirely manipulated these environments because we can just eat food that we buy at the store, have it delivered to our house, that we don't spend our entire life desperately chasing calories. So we live in a manufactured world, a manufactured bias. So the question is not technology, yes or no, or even radical technology, yes or no. We're already there. The question is, which radical technologies do we apply and how to build the kind of future that we want?
That's true. I noticed all those people hiking are wearing shoes. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the argument breaks down at some
exactly.
point. When I hear about DNA being used for storage and being able to take bits of our DNA from our skin and use them, like this just all makes, and I'm not that guy, it all makes me go like, okay, we were designed by aliens. Come on. This is all just super high-tech stuff, and we're learning how to emulate it, but it's a few years out, a few more years out. It's like, and if you're new to the show, I am not that guy. I usually bring that stuff up never.
Right.
Because I leave that to the stoners who do 6-hour podcasts with the aliens guy from the History Channel. That is not.
I did a 5.5 with Lex Friedman, so maybe I'm one of those guys.
Yeah, you might be. Might be. That's a long show.
Yeah.
It just absolutely blows my mind. I mean, it's really something.
It's incredible. What I would say is, I mean, I think the design of biological systems is incredible. But you may guess, I'm not an intelligent design person, and I have actual mathematical proof, which I'll tell you in a second. But I think it's pretty incredible that these systems evolved. I mean, that is just amazing to me. You don't need, people say, oh my God, the human body is so complex, and if one thing goes wrong, you're dead. It must be intelligent design. It's like, can you imagine somebody at a whiteboard and saying, all right, we're going to design a humans. If humans were intelligent design, I know how to break it. It's like, so there's a body and then there's a head, and you just twist off the head and you can just twist it on someplace else, and it snaps in and snaps out, and then you can keep going. Can you imagine somebody at that intelligent design whiteboard? It's like, I've got a plan, and they go, oh yeah, what's your plan? Well, as you get older, you lose hair on the top of your head, but random hairs start growing sideways out of your ears.
Yeah.
Because, oh yeah, that's intelligent design. That's a great. So that's my one mathematical proof against it. And the second thing is, like someone said, I've got a design. Your brain is really important. So we're going to put it like right in the middle of your head so it can be protected. And we're going to have all this armor of your cranium that's just protecting, because that's where it needs to be. And then we have your testicles, which are really important for reproduction. And we're just going to dangle them in a sack, kind of totally exposed. And you just walk around with those things in the middle. It's like, so yeah, that's a great plan. If it was me, if it was intelligent, it's like, no, we're going to make like a armor with spikes, and that's going to protect your testicles. Yeah, so we've evolved.
Yeah, tell me about, on that note, tell me about living cement. This is fascinating.
Yeah, so it's like I was saying before, we have these products that are part of modern life, and cement, concrete, fertilizer, all of these things. We live the lives that we live because of these super materials. Václav Smil writes very convincingly about this. And so with cement, I mean, cement is everywhere. That's why our cities can grow so rapidly. China, in like 3 years, about a decade ago, used more cement than the entire United States used in the entire 20th century. So these things are just, and cement is really useful. It takes a huge amount of energy to make cement. So cement is a massive contributor to climate change. And yet when we look at the natural world, you see stuff happening so quickly at scale. And so, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico, there was a 50-mile blob of sargassum, which is a form of seaweed. And basically there was run out through the Mississippi River of fertilizers coming through and it just spurred this growth. So 50 miles of sargassum that grew relatively quickly. So we have these materials that grow really, really fast. And so there is research being done, and I talk about this in Boulder, Colorado, and in Amsterdam and other places, of saying, all right, can we use natural systems to come to cement? So the U.S. Air Force is now working with these biological materials, and basically what you do is you're in a desert. Let's say you're at war, and you need to create a runway. You spray these biological materials on the sand, and they form a bond, a natural bond, connecting the sand and turning that sand into a hardened runway. And so if you have these kinds of source materials, this company, Prometheus in Boulder is working on this, you can say, all right, we're going to start with sand and we're going to add these things. And then one essentially bio brick is going to become 2. And then until you turn off, 2 will become 4. and 4 will become 8, kind of like the cells that we talked about in a body. So it's not that we're going to not use cement. We live in a world where we need cement. It's not that we're not going to use fertilizer. We're going to have some kind of stimulant to help our plants grow. The question is, can we think of new and better and more sustainable ways of doing those things? And that's where these tools, and again, it's not just biotechnology, it's the intersection of genetics, AI, biotechnology, and other technologies that give us these superpowers that feel like magic. But just like you were saying, the stuff we're doing now is magic to our ancestors.
Yeah,
if we had gone to our ancestors who were doing homespun or loincloths and said, like, this shirt, the cloth was spun in a factory. I think this one's from India. And it was just on a machine. It was, again, how many WTFs would it take? Just like, how is that even possible? What kind of machine? How is the machine run? Like, everything. So we live in a WTF world, and we're moving toward an extra WTF world.
We're running out of the type of sand we need to make concrete, so this bio-cement can't. I did an episode on sand with this guy Vince Beiser, and he talks about like sand mafia. We'll link it in the show.
Oh no, people are stealing.
Sand mafia.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It is incredible.
I mean, I got a whiff of that when I was at the Dead Sea in Israel like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
They put these giant stones in there, and I was like, "Oh, too bad there's all these rocks, you know." And like, we had to do that because people were dredging the mud out and selling it for like cosmetic use.
Yeah.
And then there's these beaches in India where there's just no sand, and there's people stealing it. And if you go there and you try and like the people who need to use the water, they're getting killed by the pirates who are stealing. It's like sand piracy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely nuts. I know that there's enviro pigs and salmon that mature faster. I mean, it's all...
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So people say, oh, I just want pigs to be pigs, or I want chickens to be chickens. It's like, we are late to that game. We've been effing with these animals. These are domesticated animals, and we've supersized them, we've hacked them, we've done everything. So enviro pigs that are genetically engineered to make them impervious to many viral infections, and in some cases to grow faster and to process different nutrients differently. It can just save a lot of life, actually, even of pig life, because when they have these pathogenic outbreaks among pigs, sometimes we have to kill millions, tens of millions of pigs get slaughtered. The same thing is true with these essentially super salmon. So the basic story is that, and I forgive me if I get this wrong, Pacific salmon grow faster, Atlantic salmon taste better. And so we've gone, because it used to be that most of us ate beef and pork, and then there was the fish as the new white meat, and so now everybody wants to eat fish. And so we started eating so much salmon that we couldn't take it naturally. And so now we have all of these salmon farms, and we have to eat something. And so fish seems like a good idea, at least to me for now. But then the question is, well, how can we make these systems more productive? Because even the salmon farms, where most of the salmon we eat come from, have become quite horrible places where they're full of antibiotics, they're full of salmon swimming in waste. And so it's the question, if we could, and which we can, make the delicious Atlantic salmon grow 50% faster by giving them a few genes from the Pacific salmon and a few small other genetic modifications. So you'd have bigger salmon and more salmon. You'd have to kill less salmon. Is that a good idea? There's not a complete answer to it, but it seems like something that we have to consider. And there's a company, Aqua Bounty, Aqua Advantage, that's already doing this. Now there are these companies that are growing salmon essentially in these massive inland aquariums. So if you have these genetically altered salmon that grow bigger faster, and you have them in filtered systems, so they're not exposed to all these bad things, so they're not getting these infections, it seems to me it's a pretty good way to get the salmon. Is it better for everyone to become a vegetarian? Probably in some cosmic way, yes, but it's not happening. Right? For now, it's not going to happen. So if you say, well, our strategy is we're going to be all in on a wonderful utopian vision, and that's all we're going to do, I think that's really dangerous. The thing is, we need these animal products for the foreseeable future. How do we get them in the most sustainable way, and the tools of the intersecting AI, genetics, and biotechnology revolutions have to be part of that story.
Are we worried at all about unforeseen consequences? Like someone goes, "Oh, I'm going to take one of these salmon and then keep it as a pet." The guy's mom says, "You're not keeping that crap in here," and throws it in the water. And now this thing is breeding in wherever.
So I've done the Lake Placid Iron Man like 10 times, and so the movie Lake Placid, it's exactly about it. Someone throws an alligator, and the alligator becomes like this monster eating people in Lake Placid. There is a 100% chance of unforeseen consequences. Life is full of unforeseen consequences, and so it should not be, oh, this technology could be cool, let's just race for it and everything is okay. And it should not be, this is so scary that we should somehow, if we could, pull the plug just because it's so scary. What it must be is these are capabilities, incredibly powerful technologies that have great potential upsides and real potential downsides. And what do we need to do now to increase the odds of good outcomes? That's why I say all the time, it's not just some kind of fluke that evolution has preserved the emotion of anxiety in humans and other animals. That's part of our survival. It's like we worry about stuff, maybe sometimes too much, but we worry about stuff because that's our biological way of saying, hey, this is a scary thing. You better start planning so that this scary thing isn't realized. So there will be unforeseen consequences. There will probably be terrible unforeseen consequences. Right now, if you're the defense minister of Ukraine and things have turned and Ukraine's really struggling in its war with Russia, if you aren't investing in autonomous killer robots and drones and other things because Russia is jamming these drones and the control systems are unreliable, if you aren't investing in autonomous killer robots, you're committing treason against your country because your people are going to be taken over. Your lives are going to be lost. Your kids are going to be kidnapped. But if you do, you're also pushing forward something that's going to be very hard for humans to stop because once there are all these autonomous killer robots everywhere, can we guarantee that we're going to control them forever? That's Skynet. And we can't. And so that's why this isn't an abstract. There are very real pressures. We need to be honest about them, and we need to try to navigate. And in the book, I have a whole kind of preliminary framework for how we can think about how do we navigate, at least in the direction of where we'd like to go.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Remember, you can also enjoy The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our podcast feed is a treasure trove of insights from intellectuals, authors, spies, artists, athletes, pioneers, engineers, former mafia bosses, and business leaders, all sharing their amazing stories and secrets to success. For more information, click the link in the description. Now, back to the show.
You mentioned this thing in the book, and it's Chat GPT listening to, I'm going to get this wrong, listening to people speak, and it can sort of predict Alzheimer's. Am I close?
So basically, human beings, there's all of this, what we call data from our perspective, but there's all kind of messaging. Human biology is a system of systems. And so the more that we look, technical word is biomarkers, but there's all kinds of places where you can look and you can see clues of something else. So they have this retinal imaging, which you can do, which with really cheap technology, but using AI, you can just look into your retina and you can say, hey, you have this problem with your blood pressure, with your whatever. And so certainly AI, there are already programs where an AI system can just listen in to your speaking on the phone and just say, hey, here's a shift in these kind of nanoseconds between your words, and it's showing some kind of decline. And what we're going to find out is that there's so much information. As I talked earlier about our shift from precision to predictive and preventive healthcare, there's so much information that's coming out of our bodies that these sensors can understand us in ways that we can't understand ourselves. Like you and I are talking right now. There's the stuff that we know consciously that's happening, but there's a lot more information that's flowing back. But just imagine that I had an AI that was monitoring my biorhythms, and you had an AI that was monitoring your biorhythms. And let's just say that I wanted to know more of what was happening with you, and I answered a question, And then you could say, oh, well, you're actually causing anxiety. There's this kind of reaction and it's like things that we just don't perceive because we can't focus on everything. Like right now, we're in this room. There are these cameras here. You have your producer over there. There's a lot of things that are happening. There's a little hum of the air conditioning. I'm not thinking about those things. I'm in this conversation with you. But these sensors can think about a lot of different things and then say, all right, what's of all those things, what are important things that we should know? I was doing a Fox interview last week and somebody was for a different story, but during the break they were asking me about how the CIA is using AI for its satellite imagery. And they were saying they thought it's like up there, and I said no. Basically, we have spy satellites that are taking gazillions of pictures of the world over and over and over, and the job of looking at those pictures to figure out what's important. It's so much bigger than it. So once in a while, I say, all right, there's a North Korean missile launcher, and it's moved from here to there, and we know we're going to focus on that thing. But there's so much data, we just can't focus on it. But to have a machine and say, hey, here's what we're looking for. Look at all of these billions, maybe trillions of photos and say, all right, what are the patterns and how do we see them? And so that can apply in analyzing satellite imagery. It can apply in looking at biomarkers and learning things about ourselves. Your question about Alzheimer's, but it's just across the board for all sorts of things.
Is this something that people can use, the Alzheimer's thing? Is that
so? Right now, my parents are in their 80s.
Yeah,
so now they're doing great, but getting older. So every time I'm on faculty for a thing called NextMed Health that Daniel Kraft runs, and so every year we're talking about these things, and there are these different programs that you can use that people put on their parents' phones.
Yeah.
That are just kind of listening to their parents and looking for patterns. And I think that those things right now, it's like I was saying before, it's like, oh, we're going to go and do AI. But I think the way it should work is there's just a suite of technologies that are integrated into things that we're already doing. They're just part of our iPhones. Sure. They're part, and when they see something that's concerning, then they alert you or maybe alert your physician. So these technologies exist for sure.
Right. It's like how
but they haven't been mainstream.
I see. So it's like how the watch will go, hey, you have AFib events.
Yeah.
Here's a file.
Yeah.
Send it to your doctor.
And I think so. So right now, people go to their doctor when they have a medical moment.
Right.
Like I had this symptom, I'm going to the doctor. And again, I write about this in the book. It should be just seamless that we have even now. You have. I'm just wearing a $20 Timex, but you actually have a fancier watch.
I was gonna say, man, you are very. That's a dumb watch.
It really is because I have a rule on. I don't
mean stupid. I just mean it doesn't have
I agree.
anything fancy in it.
I live in New York City, and you see, not far from here, all these people. In the finance where you walk into a meeting. And it's like the watch is like the handbag, and it's like people are saying, "Oh," and so I have a rule: you can never spend more than $30 on a watch, because otherwise you're kind of buying into the thing. You're in the game. But I do have one watch, which is this is an aside, but and I'll come back to the thing about medical sensing, but I have a really beautiful IWC watch.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And the reason why I have it is so my father was born in a little village in Austria. And so in 1938, he and my grandparents escaped from Austria to Switzerland, where they were displaced persons for 10 years.
Sure.
And they were unable to work by law, although they were grateful to get asylum in Switzerland for the 10 years before they came into America. And so just when the war ended, my grandfather was looking at ways to feed the family. And so it was, I guess you could call it a business, but he would just go on the train where there were the American soldiers and he would try to like sell people watches or buy watches. He had this little thing. And the Americans mostly didn't speak German, but my grandfather, German was his native language. But he spoke also a little bit of Yiddish.
Okay.
And so there were the Jewish American soldiers. Some of them spoke Yiddish from their parents and growing up here. And so my grandfather would walk up and down these trains with the American soldiers saying, "Sprechst du Mamaloschen? Do you speak the mother tongue?" And he'd find these soldiers who spoke Yiddish, and then he had this little business of selling people watches, buying watches, and then once in a while, when he found a nice watch to keep, he would keep it. And so this watch that my grandfather got in 1945, I was moving my parents. First, we moved them from the home in Kansas City where I grew up to their apartment in Denver, and then an apartment in Denver to the assisted living where they are now in Denver. And then we came across this watch, and it was like all scratched up, and it was 1,000,000 years old.
Sure.
And I thought, oh my God, this is such a beautiful watch. And my dad said, no, you have to take it. So I took it I live on the Upper East Side here in New York, and there's a little watch store. And I took it, and they had this old guy who told me that his great-grandfather, he was like fourth generation watch repairman. His great-grandfather had done it in the Ottoman Empire in what's now Turkey.
Wow.
And they took the entire watch apart, oiled everything, cleaned it, gave a new crystal. I got a new band. And anyway, so it's still under $30. I mean, it's free.
That is right up there with your father kept this watch in his ass for 5 years.
Oh, that old chestnut.
Yeah. It was in a nicer place, I think, your watch. That's incredible. That's really something.
Yeah, so let me come back to medical sensing.
Well, do you have an Austrian passport? You can basically file a letter and get one overnight.
I could. I have mixed feelings about Austria. We kind of left under negative circumstances.
Yeah.
So I don't, I have to say, obviously with all the problems they're having in Europe, there is an appeal of having a European passport. But, and again, I'll come back to medical sensing.
Sure.
There is nothing like being the son of a refugee to make you love this effing country of America with all of its problems. And so I'm kind of here. I really want to fight to make this the best place. And it really just pisses me off, frankly, when I see people who are here who aren't valuing what we have. That doesn't mean part of valuing what we have is fighting to make it better. But
not just planning your exit strategy.
But I also mean, you just see all these people. Again, I support free expression. People burning American flags, pulling down monuments, marching with Hamas flags, calling for death to America. Like we have such deep flaws. There was a horrible genocide against the Native Americans, slavery, everything. But this is a country that's trying to get better. And it just pisses me off when I see it. And no matter who is doing it, during the BLM stuff, I was upset that all these monuments were being pulled down, even monuments of people who I thought were horrible people. But we have a democracy so that different people can work together. If we want to take down monuments, by all means, let's have a process. And that's true then, these whatever you want to call them, people marching behind Hamas flags. And I
call them traitors, but there's other words.
I don't know who your listeners are, but I've been very, very clear on my Twitter that, being in an encampment, harassing students on a college campus behind a Hamas flag saying there's no solution, intifada, revolution, is just the exact equivalent of being in a KKK robe and burning a cross on a college campus. And I think both of them are not acceptable in my view. So I love this country, and I want to do everything I can to make this country and our world as great as it can be. And now circling back to medical sensing, but your watch is a medical sensor, and there's so much. I don't know whether your heartbeat is being monitored.
I'm sure it is,
but it should be, and it could be even now that it's being monitored, and you don't even know. You never pay attention, but someday, if something goes wrong, you get a little alert. And so we could have that, like you were talking with the glucose monitors, but we could have kind of everything monitors. You could have your glasses. Now there's the thing of Meta with Ray-Ban, where these, it's much better than these Google Glass early versions. So maybe we'll have just things that just look like glasses or look like contacts. And we don't even think about having them, but they'll be kind of watching us. And that, I know that scares people. Yeah. But if there's something that's wrong, like if I'm developing diabetes, type 2 diabetes, I want to know right away. I don't want to wait until something goes. There's a lot of things. And so I think that kind of smart, appropriate sensing. And whether it's animals, whether it's our food supply, right now there's a fear, a danger of H5N1 bird flu, and we don't have enough sensors in our animal farms to give us the early warning that we need. We need to be building all of those systems. We need and we need to balance our need for that and our very justifiable desire for privacy and our very human need to recognize that the story of humans aren't just these simple data flows, and it's something more complex.
Man, there's so much that I'm going to cover in the show close, but there's some stuff that only you can really do justice to. You told me before that math is the language of physics, but biology doesn't have an equivalent language yet, and maybe AI could potentially become this. So explain just briefly math being the language of physics for people who are blogging and not
basically, when we try to figure out how are we going to get to the moon? How are we going to get to the moon? How are we going to make a loop around the moon and we're going to come back? We have to do these mathematical calculations to just understand what's happening. And it's not like, we have a feeling that the moon is this far from the Earth at this particular time, because if we do that, these spaceships are going to crash. Right. And so it's true with all of physics. We've developed these systems, and we use math to understand those systems. The issue with biology is also based on a language, but we don't yet speak that language. Actually, last night at this MIT event, and I asked this question a lot. I asked people, having a complete understanding of human biology, that's 100, and having no understanding is 0, where are we now in our understanding of the full complexity of human biology?
4. No.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I say 3, 4.
Oh, really?
I think you're exactly right. No, I think that is the
lowball.
I think that's I think that's exactly right. Because there's so much that's happening. It's not just one thing. It's not like humans are like genetics and other stuff.
Right.
It's like we have all of these systems. Some of them we understand pretty well, some we don't understand at all. Like if someone said, well, can you fully explain how one cell functions? We can't even do that. We know some of the basic architectures, but we don't even know what we don't know. I mean, there was a long time when humans didn't know that viruses even existed. So how could we have done analysis of viruses if we didn't even know they were there? But as I was saying before, human biology and all of biology is roughly as complex as it was a million years ago. But the sophistication of our tools is increasing at an exponential rate. And so we're going to move up that understanding from 4 to 5 to 6. And it's just, even if it takes 100 years or longer, and at every level, we're going to understand more. And when we understand more, we're going to be able to do more, and we're going to want to do more, because that's the history of our species. And so, because these systems are so complex, we need a language, and understanding the language of biology, which already exists, for us to understand it, we need these capabilities, and AI with all these other technologies will be that.
So then we'll be able to do the biological equivalent of going to the moon or going to Mars.
Yeah, and we're doing it now every day. And the thing is, with going to Mars, there will be a day, I hope, when we go to Mars. As a matter of fact, yesterday, one of the co-hosts of this event was my friend Jeff Hoffman, who is an MIT engineering professor, but former astronaut. He's done five space missions. And so he was one of the leaders of, first there was a project of building a helicopter that could fly on Mars. Then they proved that you could actually generate oxygen on Mars using materials that are already there. I don't even remember what I was saying. What was the question?
Well, I was mentioning if math is the language of physics and that gets us to Mars, biology becoming.
Exactly. I'm so sorry. You're right.
The biological equivalent of Mars.
Yes, and so there will be a day, I hope, when humans make it to Mars, and we'll say, oh yeah, that happened on this day. But that will have been possible because of all of these incremental steps that we made along the way. And we are making those steps very, very rapidly in understanding biology. So where we are in our understanding of biology coming back to the exponential point we discussed earlier, is way more than it was 10 years ago. And that was way more than it was 10 years before that. But if you look at all of the scientific progress of the last 100 years, and you compare that to the 100 years before that, and 100 years before that, we see this rapid acceleration. And the big takeoff point was the scientific revolution in Europe. Because I write about this in the book. The beginning of the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, we learned how to learn. Like, that's the thing. It's learning how to learn for humans, for our machines. And as we as humans and as our machines learn more about how to learn, more learning becomes possible. And more learning about how to learn becomes more possible. Again, it's this same acceleration point we talked at the start of the show.
So again, everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, definitely come to the audio version where I'm going to do there's 10 or 15 minutes of stuff from your book that I'm going to cover in the show close that I can actually explain. And
no, can I say, I've written the book so that people can take this book to the beach and enjoy reading it.
It's not heavy.
And then think, oh my God, I really enjoyed it. That was a fun read. And I accidentally learned something. And I think it's unfortunate that that people who are writing about technical stuff and scientific stuff don't make it accessible to people, because it's not everybody. This is about all of our future. And I've written the book because every single person has a role that they not only must play in deciding how these technologies are used or not used in your life and in the world. And if we see this just as an elite thing, and you need to have all this technological knowledge and lingo and whatever to join the conversation, that's really a mistake. I for my last book, I was speaking at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which is very close to where you live. And I was a guest of the director, and the director invited me to speak to the top 300 scientists at Lawrence Livermore about the future of biology. And I said to them at the outset of my talk, I said, I'm really honored to be here. You're among the top scientists in the world, and I'm honored to come to speak to you about the future of biology.
Right.
But if you hear something that doesn't sound quite right, please raise your hand, because I'm entirely self-taught in the sciences, and the last biology course I took was in 11th grade in high school in Kansas City.
Oh, man.
And I wouldn't say that if I didn't have a lot of confidence in my thing.
Sure.
But the reason I say it now is because I've had to teach myself all of this. And so I haven't had the shorthands that I would have had. I mean, I have a PhD, but it's not in this. The shorthands to get to the next level. I feel like I have to kind of understand this concept, say, all right, this concept leads to this concept. And so I've tried to translate that into just explaining this stuff. So it's not like you don't have to know this background. My job in writing the book is explaining something to you. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And frankly, that's what my last book, Hacking Darwin. Before that, I'd written my 2 science fiction novels, Genesis Code and Eternal Sonata. And when I was on my book tours for those books, and I just explained to people the underlying science that you needed to understand for the story. And I just explained it in my way, kind of natural language. And then I could just see in people's eyes like, oh, that's what genetics is. Like, I'd heard this word DNA, that sounded scary. And these other things, it sounded like foreign concepts. Oh, that's what it is. It's relevant. It's about me. It's part of my story. And so that's my whole goal for doing all of this work that I do is to bring everybody. It's our story. We're writing that story, and that's why everybody needs to be part of it and to be not just welcomed. The only way we're going to succeed is if everybody says, "Hey, I'm writing this story. I have a role, and I want to play that role."
That's a great place to end. However, I don't want to end right there because even if now we're going to have a clunky ending, I don't care. You were one of my turning points on the whole lab leak theory with COVID, because at first it was like only kind of kooky folks, and they'll write in and they're like, we were right, you were wrong, and they're really angry about this. But people, it's important to come to conclusions for the right reasons, not because you had like a really good gut hunch that the story didn't add up.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of, those people I've noticed have a lot of hunches about other things that are total nonsense, actually.
True.
And so it's called resultsing, right? When you get the right result in one thing and then you go, oh, surely I must be right about all of the other things where I have absolutely no evidence, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But when you started saying it, I was like, well, he's not nuts.
Yeah.
And
I have some people who can come and give you a counter.
They will give you a counter example, yeah. And I talked with Allison Young, who's a journalist who talks a lot about the lab leaks. Yeah. But tell me about this, because you weren't like early in on this. It was kind of like, let's figure out the origin, and then you were actually looking for the truth, not to prove an agenda, and then you started leaning into.
Well, I haven't been part of any conspiracies. I think
that's just somebody in a conspiracy.
No, I know exactly. Like I think the Earth is round. I love science. I think that Lee Harvey Oswald was, as far as I can tell, acting on his own. I'm not a conspiracy person. But in January of 2020, I remember this very well. I was in our dining room at home, and I was just telling my partner, I said, I'm looking at the available evidence about COVID-19 origins, and I'm looking at the news reports about COVID origins, and I'm seeing two different stories.
Yeah.
In the news reports, they're saying it comes from a market, it comes from the wild, case closed. But in the evidence, I'm seeing a totally different story, because it was in late January of 2020, there was a paper in The Lancet by Chinese scientists saying that more than a third of the early cases of COVID were of people who had no exposure to the market, the Huanan seafood market. I thought, well, if that's the case, that means the market is a super spreader location. It's not the origin.
Right.
And I just started digging. I just, about a year before, I'd been in Wuhan. I'd been invited to give a keynote talk for a conference, but once they realized what I was going to say after I'd arrived, they canceled my talk. I have a whole blog post on this. It's for a different day. So I knew that Wuhan wasn't a place like Cambodia, where I actually used to live, where you have these crazy wild markets with all these wild animals. The people in Wuhan actually looked down on the people in southern China who eat the wild animal food. I mean, the few of them do eat that stuff. But so I knew that this was the center of biotech, a center of biotech research in China. I knew they had the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Very quickly learned in about 2 seconds they had the world's largest collection of captive coronaviruses. That they were doing very aggressive research on these coronaviruses, trying to train them to better infect human cells at the point of the ACE2 receptor, which is exactly the point where the SARS-CoV-2 viruses connect to our cells.
Research,
yes, gain of function and serial passage and other things. And then soon after, we learned that actually the Wuhan Institute of Virology had worked with the EcoHealth Alliance and the University of North Carolina, had proposed a funding application, which was denied to DARPA, the Defense Department, to genetically engineer a SARS-CoV coronavirus to make it able to give it a furin cleavage site able to infect human cells at the point of the ACE2 receptor. As I told Vanity Fair, if I submitted a proposal to paint Central Park purple and was denied, and the next morning we woke up and Central Park had been painted purple, it would be very logical for someone to say, hey, maybe this guy has something to do with it. And instead of that, starting in February of 2020, you had all these people who were saying, we know, which they couldn't have, we know it comes from nature, and anyone raising the possibility of a lab origin is a conspiracy theorist worthy of condemnation. And it just pissed me off.
This is what people who are respectable disease researchers told me.
Yeah.
And so that was why I was like, look, I have it on good authority that this is, for people who understand how these things work, that this isn't true. So that made it even more.
And Frank, and I'm not one of these people who said like, oh, experts are bullshit.
Of
like,
course
it's like
not.
The world needs experts. It's like,
based on the idea that that's
it's like people say, oh, experts are bullshit. Yeah, right. I'm going to go get a brain surgery. I'm just going to have
the guy at Starbucks.
Joe. Exactly. Like, we need experts. But in this one case, because the right answer, and now with the Fauci testimony, and I've been deeply involved on this topic, not just on podcasts, the lead witness in the first congressional hearings. I was the lead author of these open letters that really opened up the question of pandemic origins starting in 2021. Leslie Stahl did a big piece. But it's the right answer in 2020 was, we don't know where this came from.
Right.
It could very well come from a research-related incident. It may come from some kind of natural event or a spillover in the market. We just don't know. That's why we need a full investigation. And we categorically condemn the Chinese government for destroying samples, hiding records, imprisoning Chinese journalists, gagging Chinese scientists, and blocking any meaningful international investigation. That was the right answer. But I think these guys, I don't think, in their mind, I don't think it was malicious. I think they thought science is under attack. Remember, it was the Trump administration, and science was under attack. And that if we get people jazzed up about a possible lab origin, it's going to, the Trump administration is going to go crazy. I mean, there are all these kinds of things that were natural impulses.
Yeah.
But that's not what the scientific method is about. The scientific method is we're going to follow the evidence even if it takes us to an uncomfortable place. So I'm a liberal Democrat. I served in the Clinton administration. But my feeling was, I'm not going to say something is wrong because, I mean, Donald Trump initially supported Xi Jinping, but later when he shifted, I'm not going to say something is wrong because Donald Trump, for whatever mixed motivation, is saying it's right. I'm going to look at the evidence and say, hey, what is right? So it's been a crazy journey over the last 4.5 years. But we went from 4.5 years ago, where literally I did not know a single person who thought this, to now where I think people are at very least recognizing that a research-related origin is a possibility. And I think most people intuitively believe it's the most likely. And I personally believe that the overwhelming weight of the available circumstantial evidence, and it's circumstantial because China won't allow an investigation. Right. So it's like
we're never going to really know.
Well, maybe we will, maybe we won't, but it's not like you're going to have a trial of a mafia don and say, well, all the witnesses got knocked off. He must be innocent. Right. I mean, it's like if you're blocking everything, it's like that also should add to perceptions of guilt. But 27 million people are dead as a result of COVID-19. It's excess deaths. If we don't get to the bottom of saying, hey, what went wrong? How do we fix our problems? We're going to be facing something much worse. And we're going to say, we didn't have the courage to ask the tough questions, even though they were politically difficult.
Yeah, man. This is one of those big areas where I changed my mind, but it also was a big lesson in even experts can be wrong. And sometimes there's motivated reasoning and everybody has their cognitive bias. But it's unfortunate, right? Because a lot of those same people are now going, and the vaccine is toxic and it's designed to kill you. Yeah. And it's like, what are you going to say when you were wrong about lab?
And that's why, for me, it's the same point I was making earlier about an ethical and even a procedural North Star. Mm-hmm. And to say, this is what I stand for, these values. And one of those values is, if you're a scientist, it's following the scientific method. And I think that, like I said, people wanted to protect science when science was under attack, and that's laudable. But if your North Star is follow the evidence, then you have to kind of stick to that. And sometimes you're going to have to say things and do things that are really uncomfortable, and that just is.
Jamie Metzl, thank you very much, man.
It's really my great pleasure. And I want to say, Jordan, I really value what you do, because it's in science, there's the concept of translation. So the way the cell works is your genome is inside the nucleus. It has the genetic information. It then translates that information into the RNA, which leaves the nucleus, because you want your genome connected to the nucleus. It goes outside of the cell, and then it communicates to the ribosome to say, hey, let's make this protein. So there's like a process of like big ideas becoming life. Mm-hmm. And I think that the work that you're doing and these kinds of conversations that are made accessible to people, it's not just entertainment, although I hope it's entertaining. It's allowing people and empowering people to be part of these really important conversations. And that's why I do the work that I do, and that's why I know you do the work you do, and you're doing a great job, and it's my honor to be here.
Thank you for checking out this entire episode on YouTube. If you want to follow up on this topic, check out our podcast feed or visit us on our website at jordanharbinger.com, where you can learn more about our guest and dive even deeper into what we discussed today. And remember, YouTube only has about a quarter of the episodes that we release here on the Jordan Harbinger Show audio feed. Any podcast app should have us. Check out the links in the description where you'll find access to all of our shows that don't appear on YouTube, such as Skeptical Sunday, where we debunk topics like crystal healing, GMOs, conspiracy theories, homeopathy, tipping, and even lawns to find out if they're backed by science and or logic. Also, our Feedback Friday episodes where we help people escape from cults, get raises at work, and take all manner of questions from you, the audience, and some of that stuff is dicey. Every episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show has something useful that you can take away and apply in your own life and help you navigate what I know can often seem like the overwhelming and paralyzing challenges of modern life. Thank you for watching, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe.